Hello and welcome to the National Press Club and the day's Westpac address. My name is Tom Connell. I'm the club's president and an anchor at Sky News. Our guest today is Mark Doustdar. He's the president and CEO of Novo Nordisk and recently appointed to those positions in August 2025. It's a giant, Novo Nordisk, in the global pharmaceutical industry, as at April 2024, the market cap $570 billion, that's a B, larger than the entire economy of Denmark, where the company is headquartered. Of course, as Morris has mentioned, a big week in Australia and Danish relations. The Danish royal family, King Frederik and Queen Mary, in Canberra on a state visit. And Wednesday this week as well, we have Ulrik Hagerup, the CEO of Constructive Institute Address, speaking about journalism and the problematic role media plays in democracy. The company, though, Novo Nordisk, has commenced a strategy to move away from traditional focus on diabetes care and is seeking an ambitious plan to tackle serious chronic diseases. His speech today entitled How Australia Can Lead the World Against Chronic Disease. Please welcome Mark Doustdar.
Thank you very much, Tom, after that good introduction. And I was also shown the pictures of all the previous speakers at the press club. Then I hope I do not mess this one up. But I do like to appreciate every distinguished guest here, members of the National Press Club, ladies and gentlemen, for having me here. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land on which we meet today and pay my respect to the elders past and present. At Novo Nordisk, we recognize the deep connections First Nations people have to the country, a connection nurtured for more than 65,000 years. Let me begin with a fact that should stop every Australian in their tracks. According to the Health and Wellbeing Queensland report, a child born in Queensland today may have a lifespan of 4 to 5 years shorter than their parents. 4 to 5 years shorter than their parents. Not because of war, not because of famine, but because of obesity. 5 years, that's 1,825 days of time lost with loved ones. And that's not some distant future. That's happening right now in our current generation. Living with overweight and obesity is more than just carrying extra weight. It's a gateway to chronic disease, contributing to burden of some other 30 different diseases. Those diseases include type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular issues, cancers, and chronic kidney disease. Chronic diseases has become the health challenge of the century. So, where does my company come in all of this? I joined Novo Nordisk some 30 years ago as an office clerk in Vienna, Austria. Since then, I've had the privilege of leading operations across some of the world's most challenging markets, from Middle East to Southeast Asia. But what makes Novo Nordisk different, and why I believe we're well positioned to help Australia to tackle this crisis, is that the fact that we are having a quite unique pharmaceutical company. It's not a typical company. Let me try to explain that. More than 70% of Novo Nordisk is controlled by a Novo Nordisk Foundation. That's a non-profit organization. It's one of the world's largest organizations dedicated to funding long-term solutions that improve people's health and the sustainability of the society and the planet. This allows us to take a long-term view in terms of patients' outcomes, delivering innovations to people who need our support. So it is a bit different than what a typical CEO of a pharma will be standing here. This year marks Novo Nordisk's 50-year anniversary in Australia, a half a century of commitment to delivering medicines to more than 1.6 million Australians living with diabetes, obesity, and rare diseases. At this point, I want to also acknowledge that the Australian government recently released their 10-year National Strategic Framework of Chronic Conditions. That framework provides a comprehensive roadmap for exactly the kind of collaboration actions that I'll be outlining today during my speech. What I'm proposing is to support this framework's vision for prevention, a multidisciplinary care and enhanced support for the priority populations. Now, let me share why I believe Australia, more than any other country in the world, can solve the health challenge of the century. First, it's worth setting out what we're dealing with here. 15.4 million Australians live with at least one chronic condition. Chronic conditions contribute to 90% of all deaths. And here's what makes this even more complex. 9.7 million Australians, or 38% of your population, lives with multimorbidity. This isn't just about managing one disease. It's about people navigating clinicians, multiple medications, and fragmented care systems. Managing this problem requires coordinated approach across the entire health systems, not siloed condition-by-condition treatment. In their current form, Australia's health and financial system are not designed to support this burden. Now, let me zero in on obesity briefly. I've just thrown a lot of figures and numbers at you, but here's another number that you should remember. 13 million. That's the number of people in this country living with diabetes and obesity or overweight. That's a very large population. This is every person in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane combined, ranking you 10th highest in OECD. To drive home the significance of the problem, the rate of obesity alone has tripled over the last 45 years. Tripled in 45 years. As I mentioned moments ago, living with overweight and obesity is about more than carrying extra weight. It's the gateway to chronic disease. And chronic disease is no longer just a health concern. It's a direct threat to productivity, economic stability, and social well-being. Chronic diseases and those linked to obesity fuel disability, time off from work, and early retirement. Workforce health directly shapes a nation's ability to grow, compete, and attract investments. Healthier employees means greater workforce participation, longer careers, and stronger businesses. Chronic diseases also carries direct costs, with some 54% of all disease spending going towards it. Spending on chronic conditions sits at around $98 billion and climbing. Unless something changes, 3 federal elections from now, you'll be looking at numbers that make today's figures look quite modest. Of course, chronic disease is a global crisis, not just an Australian one. The World Obesity Federation warns that by 2030, the global economic toll of the overweight and obesity could exceed $3 trillion US dollars. But here's another way to look at all this. The McKinsey Health Institute claims that investing in workforce health could lift global GDP by as much as 12%, translating into trillions in economic value. Australia has the potential not only to capture the value, but also to lead by example on the world stage. Now, you might be thinking, here comes another pharma CEO to tell us medicine is the answer. But that's not going to be my answer today. That's actually not what I'm going to tell you. I think I'm here to basically say exactly the opposite, that medicine alone will not solve the chronic disease crisis. I'm here to propose that something far more ambitious has to be done. I believe Australia can become the world's first country to truly bend the obesity-led chronic disease cure curve. Not just manage it, not just treat it, but actually prevent it at scale. And I believe Australia has everything needed to make this happen. Why do I think that? Because you've done it before. Actually, several times you've done this before. In 2012, Australia replaced colorful cigarette packs with plain brown boxes featuring graphic health warnings, despite strong opposition from the tobacco industry. You did that. And the policy not only helped reduce smoking rates, it became a global model for everyone else to follow. Some 20 countries followed you after that event. And today still, as I walk around various different airports and see those different packs of cigarettes, I can think about you starting that revolution. Now, turning to disease prevention, Australia's HPV vaccination program also stands as a global healthcare success story and a model for cancer prevention worldwide. Your national program was quickly implemented, and adolescents' vaccination rates have been, until recently, consistently above 80%. You're now set to be the first country to eliminate cervical cancer as a public health issue. Think about that, the first country in the world to have eliminated cervical cancer. These are inspiring examples as Australians lead the global world by what they invent here. The question is, can Australia once again be the first to crack a public health problem that has proved to be so intractable? So what will it take? The reality is that the government cannot solve the health challenges of this century alone. This problem is simply too big for any public purse on its own. No single actor can solve the complex, interlinked challenges of health, the competitiveness that is at the national stage, and the workforce productivity on its own. It will require a coordinated approach amongst multiple stakeholders to work in concert and create lasting solutions. This is the approach at the heart of what I view as the Australian-made moat. This model, Australian-made model, would be funded basically on the principles of collaborations and cooperations with other stakeholders. An approach that embodies the value of a fair go. The partnership would focus on two key platforms: prevent today and protect tomorrow. I'm sure you can all agree that with millions of Australians living with obesity-led chronic disease, we cannot ask to wait. They need help today. We urgently need to perfect the system for the next generation. Prevent today would focus on three things. First, expand access to treatment. In principle, this means actively reforming the PBS process to eliminate the wait time of 466 days to access innovative medicine. It takes 466 days on average today to get access to innovative medicine. It also means proposing a dedicated health budget for obesity, separate from PBS, using HTA frameworks for implementation. Secondly, reform upstream policies, modernize food labeling, enforce responsible marketing, encourage healthier habits by introducing fiscal policies that promote nutritious consumptions and supports initiatives for improved food selection in public institutions. Finally, create healthy places. Proactively co-design workable cities with transport infrastructure and mandate green spaces into urban planning. Moving to the second element of the partnership, we also need to ensure that the next generation never faces a similar crisis again. And that's when Protect Tomorrow comes in. If we intervene early today, before patterns are entrenched and before disease takes hold, we can improve health for the next generation. Protect Tomorrow focuses also on three elements. First, school support. Create environments where children grow up surrounded by healthy norms. A future where nutrition education is embedded in curriculums and schools prioritize movement. Secondly, community engagement. Ensure communities have access to playgrounds and sports facilities in every postcode. Food insecurity and affordability is addressed, and culturally responsible programs are co-created. Finally, a digital infrastructure is going to be needed. Build digital systems to link primary care, hospitals, community services, to guide care and track outcomes across children's lifetime. While a partnership model such as Prevent Today and Protect Tomorrow might strike you as aspirational, it can start, as it often does, with small steps. Let me tell you about Logan in Queensland. Logan, as you probably know, is one of the state's fastest growing regions. Its rapid growth is intensifying pressure on families who face limited access to healthy food. This is an issue that is reflected nationally, where 13% of the households experience food insecurity. That's why Novo Nordisk has recently launched the so-called Feel Good Futures program in Logan. It's a $3 million health and well-being initiative that aims to increase quality of life, physical activity, and access to nourishing food for children in the region. This is part of the Global Cities for Better Health program that Novo Nordisk organizes, which uses preventative approach in 6 different cities across 6 countries through partnership. What makes Logan special is not the investment, it's that the families are designing these programs on their own, with our help, but they do the design on their own. This approach ensures health information and programs are accessible, relevant, and useful. While it's Logan today, it could be your city tomorrow. In an ideal world, every major Australian urban center becomes a hub for change. Now, you might think, what's in it for Novo Nordisk? Why am I doing this? Where is the money for Novo? Let me be quite clear about our role. As I explained earlier, our ownership structure means we have a history of taking these long-term views in partnership with various different governments. We can invest in prevention, we can work to support the overall health and prosperity of a country over time. And we have seen that it's something that is in everyone's long-term interest, as well as, of course, my own companies. So this is very, very important to us. So here's what I will commit to you today. This afternoon, we will sign a partnership with Heart of Australia, focusing on rural Queensland to improve the early detection of chronic liver disease, a condition for which obesity is a risk factor. Heart of Australia is an innovative mobile healthcare delivery provider that brings specialist healthcare and testing directly to people that need them the most. Imagine a grandmother in remote Queensland getting a liver scan without having to travel 500 kilometers to Brisbane, and instead can do that scan where they are. That's what this partnership will deliver. Also later today, we will sign another agreement, a memorandum of understanding with the Murdoch's Children's Research Institute to fund a 3-year program on adolescent obesity in Pacific Island nations. This will be key research initiatives for the whole region. Pacific Island nations have some of the highest obesity prevalences in the world. They account for 9 out of 10 countries with the highest adult prevalence globally. But by engaging young people, their families, clinicians, and policymakers, the program will guide youth-focused recommendations that we believe will positively reshape their future. In addition, we're committing to co-design and co-fund pilot programs with Australian governments, clinicians, employers, and researchers all alike. We remain committed to investing in Australia. We would like to invest in Australian research and development focused on prevention and integrated chronic care, including generating real-world evidence. Over the past 5 years, we have invested almost $100 million in local clinical trials that have included approximately 1,400 Australian patients. The number of active trials have doubled, and we expect an additional 500 people entering our clinical trials just this year alone. What I hope these examples demonstrate is that addressing the health challenges of the century requires multiple solutions delivered via multiple partnerships. Without them, the Australian-made model cannot succeed. There is another very important factor to consider. This isn't just about prevention, although prevention alone will justify all these efforts. This is about economic opportunities. Opportunities such as building a health innovation sector that can export Australian expertise globally, cementing your leadership and intellectual property in prevention, digital health, and integrated care. Because by improving population health, you will reduce healthcare costs and create a more productive workforce, boosting local economies and supporting longer workforce participation. And there's also a moral imperative that cannot be ignored. We're talking about preventable suffering. These things can be prevented. We're talking about productive years taken from people who should be contributing to their families, to their communities, and their nation. We're talking about children who, for the first time in modern history, may have a shorter life than their parents. If there is to be any chance of solving the health challenges of the century, the status quo must change. It is critical that prevention is moved out of the shadows and into the economic mainstream. So, here's what I'm proposing. If you're sitting here or watching and you represent government at any level, I would like you to recommend the following. Take the blueprint from the National Strategic Framework and apply political will and investment to implement it at scale. Make sure to include industry as a genuine partner in those efforts and not just a passive supplier. Build AI, digital, physical, and social infrastructure so healthy choices are simple. Keep rewarding and investing in prevention. Australia currently invests just over 3% of health spend on prevention. 3%. Compare that with the other OECD countries, this ranks you, I would say, mid-table. What does that mean? It means you spend a bit more than Spain, about the same as in France, a little bit less than Denmark, and considerably less than Canada, UK, or US. Set ambitious and measurable targets with clear timelines and accountability. If you are here on behalf of the industry, such as health, mining, infrastructure, step up as genuine partner and co-invest in prevention. If you're an employer, recognize that workforce health is a national economic indicator. Offer workplace health checks, coaching, and ensure healthy food and activity options for your employees. If you have responsibility for cities and communities, become a hub for change. Co-design solutions that work in the local context pilot projects that people can relate to, and scale them up by sharing better practices wherever you are. And to everyone else here, today, let's start by getting your health check. We're all busy, but small steps can compound into healthier lives and meaningful changes. So get your health checked. Ladies and gentlemen, the 21st century defining health challenges is not infectious diseases. It's chronic diseases. And the gateway is obesity. For too long, the conversation around weight has been clouded by misconception. Let me be clear. Obesity is not a choice. Obesity is not a choice. It's a multifaceted, metabolic, chronic disease that affects each person differently. Australia has solved big problems before. Now it's time for you to do it again. Your workforce deserves better than losing productive years to diseases that can be prevented. Australia's economy deserves better than seeing ever larger share of the GDP consumed by chronic disease management. Australia can lead the world in bending the chronic disease curve. We can and we must work together to demonstrate that this is achievable through partnership. At Novo Nordisk, with our 50-year history in this country and our global expertise, we stand ready to partner with you. Your national framework has been released. The evidence is clear. The opportunity is now. At the start of my talk, I shared a sobering fact that a child born in Queensland today could live between 4 to 5 years less than their parents. Please remember that. But also remember that it doesn't have to be the case. That the future health of Australian children depends on the choices we make now and today. The competitiveness of our economy depends on it. And the world is watching to see if bold, innovative nation like Australia will lead the way once again. I'm hopeful of the choice Australia will make. Thank you for your invitation to address the National Press Club. I welcome any question you may have.
Thanks very much. Some interesting thoughts and also advice, which is also helpful in getting a health checkup. I always heed that one. You mentioned prevention and you cited plain packaging in Australia. And obviously we're talking a lot about food here. There is information on food packaging in supermarkets, but the rate of, sugar-filled muesli bars and cereals dropping into trolleys hasn't really altered at all. Is something more dramatic needed? I don't know if we could have a skull and crossbones instead of the golden arches, whether that's going too far, but what sort of information are you talking about or warning? What could food labels look like if they're really going to shift consumer decisions, do you think?
I think there are multiple ways of handling it. I can give you a couple of examples. First, I have not read any of your labels to be able to judge if they're comprehensive enough or not. I also don't know if they are visible enough or not. What changed actually when you think about what you did with the cigarettes was the exaggeration of the images you use and how it covered the whole box where it was difficult to miss it. I have lived in countries where there's a lot of food nutrition things written on the package, but frankly speaking, I need to get a binoculars to be able to read it. So the question is that being written there to obey a law, or is it genuinely being written there to change behavior? So that I cannot judge, but we cannot fool ourselves. So that's the first thing I would say. Second, I came across, so one of these cities changing health initiatives that I was talking about was Mexico City. And I remember one of the things we did with the governor of Mexico City was to avoid putting salt on restaurant tables. So wherever you went in Mexico, you would put salt everywhere, and people would just grab it before even tasting the food and put the salt there. We made an agreement that as part of the city changing behavior, the salt shaker should be put in the back, and when someone wanted salt, then they would ask the waiter to bring the salt. But you would be surprised that more than half the people never ask for the salt when they don't see it. And that small change made behavioral change. Then there's a lot of advertisement and a lot of
especially to kids and marketing.
Exactly.
And, yeah.
I would say again, I don't know how it is here. Let's say for school, when I was a kid in school, the only drink that was allowed in my school was milk and water. When I take a look at my son's school today and all the drinks that are allowed from a vending machine, it's very different. So there's so many different ways of attacking it. The question starts with how ambitious are you?
So if a parent sees a cereal box, maybe the first thing they see is whatever the cereal is, and the second thing might be 66% of your daily sugar. That level of prominence and simplicity?
Could be. You could get a job in marketing.
Might not last long. Hopefully journalism works out. Let's go to the floor. Anna Henderson from SBS.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your address. In Australia, if you don't have diabetes or another complication that doctors have prescribed this for you, then the cost of these drugs can be up to $300 a month. While on the drug, a lot of people do lose weight, but doctors I've spoken to and research kind of supports this, suggests that people lose a lot of muscle. Once they go off, they gain back fat. On top of that, our own Therapeutic Goods Administration has warned about the potential risks of suicidal ideation and that oral contraceptives aren't potentially as effective while people are on the drug. So for these drugs to be effective, do you actually have to be on them for life with all of those side effects? And with many Australians facing rising costs at the moment, doesn't this risk a large group of people going off this drug and facing other serious health complications?
Yeah, there are multiple questions I could see. Let me try to address them as best as I can. The GLP-1s have been in the market for a very long time, actually. We introduced our first daily versions of that back in 2008 and had been doing clinical trials 15 years, 10 years before that period. So they have been tested on millions of patients globally and, of course, are being used by millions of patients today. It doesn't mean that there is no side effects. All medications have side effects, but the safety of them have been quite well documented and proved, I would say. And the more actually we do tests on GLP-1s, us and our competitors, we come to conclusion that their benefits supersedes just weight reduction. They have benefits on cardiovascular systems, on kidney, on the liver. There are studies being done today on addiction, and so on and so forth. So that actually means that obviously you would need to speak to your physician to make sure that it's fitted for you. You need to consume it according to the label and according to how it's recommended. But their safety profile, I would say, are well proven in my book at least. On the affordability element, I think it's also a good question. We price these products according to their value. As you know, we start years before, 20, 25 years before, with very low probability of success. When we go into this business, we are in the business of risk. And when the risk pays off, then we have to somehow recuperate some of the fundings back in order to be able to innovate again. And that's the cycle of a pharmaceutical drug creation. Having said this, we try to, of course, also be mindful that as more and more patients come on these drugs, the prices go down, and the prices of our products have significantly come down compared to the day that we have launched them, and they will further go down. But the core of the issue, I would say, is around acknowledgement that obesity is a chronic disease, and hoping that, especially in countries like here, where taxpayers pay tax and in return get health care for free, get these products under insurance. The reason it feels $300 is a lot, and it is a lot if you have to buy it for the rest of your life, is simply because you have to pay it yourself. Imagine you had to pay for your cancer drug yourself or your rare disease drug yourself. It would be unaffordable. So our job, of course, is to continue having good dialogues with the world at large to try and explain treating obesity today saves money, and obesity is not a choice but a chronic disease that needs to be treated. And as we get there, hopefully, of course, the cost burden goes away. And to the last question of yours, should this be taken for life? If it is a chronic disease, then the answer is yes, unless a cure is found. Today, if you have hypertension, diabetes, dyslipidemia, you take your drugs for the rest of your life. If you have high cholesterol and you're taking a statin, then the cholesterol is controlled. The second you stop taking the medication, then, of course, the cholesterol goes back up. And that's the same with weight. Now, to the last question of yours, then the current generation of the products, when you lose weight, then yes, you lose actually everything. You lose muscle mass, you lose fat, you lose water, you lose because you're not eating as much, so the body just shrinks. When you go off of these drugs and then regain back, if you are not exercising, then you regain more fat rather than muscle. That's why we promote that these drugs have to be taken in combinations with healthy diets and exercise at the same time until we come with better solutions. And there are solutions looking into the future in trying and figure out how to preserve the muscle mass while attack the fat cells more. But right now, we're not there yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question from Michael Smith from the AFR on price. So any movement or consideration on reducing price in the private market? We've had cuts announced for the US, for Ozempic, for example. Is that on the cards in Australia?
Yeah. The US pricing is kind of a story on its own. US pricing, of course, is at it has been at a very different level, and now it's getting somewhat readjusted across a lot of pharmaceutical products based on the so-called most favored nation dealing that pharmaceutical companies are doing with the Trump administration. On Australian prices, actually Australia has one of the best prices globally on GLP-1 at the time, and if you take our obesity medication, it was launched, I think the latest one was launched 1.5 years ago, and since that launch, the prices are down by more than 30%. So prices are continuously going down as the volumes come up, okay. And we are in good dialogue and discussions, I would say, with also the government and trying and see how we can make ends meet.
Andrew Probyn from the Nine Network.
Mike, as you said, I'm also with the Press Club here as a director. You described obesity as a multifaceted metabolic chronic disease, but you also said that workplaces have a role in health checks. Are you suggesting that workplaces, employers should help subsidise maybe drugs like yours? Now, secondly, you've come to the National Press Club, which is a house of grand cynics. As you're aware, the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Council has said that, or committee has said that it could be extended to those who are at risk of stroke or heart attack. Am I wrong in thinking that you believe this is overly restrictive, and that your wonder drug might be best more widely applied?
That was a leading question. Let me start with the first question. I do think as employers we have a responsibility over the well-being of the employees. Different countries have different solutions to that. In the US, of course, you try and get good insurance coverage for your employees through different channels. And in other places, some employers might subsidize medications when there is no social security in that country. I will not dictate what the employers in Australia should do. But I would say that a healthy employee is a more productive one, and whichever way we can, as employers, get our employees to a better health situation, it is also beneficial for us as a company. So I can only encourage that. On the population size that you're speaking to, that's 155,000 people that you're talking to. I will say the following. I think it's
No, just spell that out. 155,000
individuals with basically BMI of 30 above and cardiovascular comorbidity, which is the population that we have a positive opinion right now from PBAC. Now, that's a very good start, because right now it's 0 people eligible for insurance. So 155,000 is better than 0. That's a very good start. But it's far from, of course, the 13 million people suffering from obesity, or 2.5 million people that are basically maybe in a broader scheme of the dialogue and the discussions. But I would say, as I mentioned, you set ambitious goals, but you take it step by step to get there. So I welcome the positive opinion. I welcome the dialogue that is being taken. But I do believe that more people deserve support and help. Now, I will end by saying that does not belittle the need for diet and exercise and healthy environment that we need to live in. You could actually take these medications as a way to avoid your responsibility, and that's not the right way to go forward. But having said this, we also know in our family members, in our friend circle, so many try really hard to lose weight, to become healthy, and they can't. And a bit of medicinal help, like we do with many other areas, goes a long way.
Thanks.
Next question comes from Corey McLeod from Innovation Oz.
Thank you for your address. Is the fast food industry going through an existential crisis? Are they fighting back? If the number of people increasingly using these drugs, their taste is changing, they're finding a different kind of appetite, is there a response from that sector?
I think that that's a general statement. There are, like anywhere else within every industry, good players, medium players, bad players. I've seen actually some really good examples of people in the food industry that have come to the same conclusion as we have, that they need to be part of healthier tomorrow and are doing the right things, maybe putting better and bigger labels on their boxes, identifying what's inside, moving away from some of the things we should not be eating. There are others that are not yet there, and we would encourage them to join. I will not get into the dialogue of how this versus that is playing on its own. I think in general there is a trend and a dialogue by a lot of people in our industry and of course in other places that has come to conclude that it's not good if our children are going to live shorter lives than we did. It's going to be the first time in modern history, and that I think is something that unites all of us. So if you think about that, then hopefully every industry and every company within the industry will do the right thing.
Thank you.
I mean, we saw the CEO of McDonald's maybe accidentally do his part by taking a very unconvincing bite of a burger recently. But in terms of genuine change, I mean, I just can't think of a fast food company anywhere that seems to have their heart in reducing obesity. It's
maybe you should have one of their CEOs here and grill them.
If he's watching, he's welcome to come down to the press club. We'll even pay for his flight tomorrow, so be a good guest. But I mean, I don't know if it's different in Denmark or other countries, but the menus here, I mean, there's not much from the bottom of the food pyramid, and it's sort of, so high in calorie and always trying to lure people back in, kids' meals, all this sort of stuff. I mean, that doesn't feel as though...
I'm not going to speak on behalf of the fast food company.
It doesn't feel like they're part of the solution.
But I do... So I think everyone will agree with you that a lot more can be done. I really think that most people, most parents, don't let their children go and eat fast food on a daily basis. I would like to think, at least. On the other hand, I also like to say that when I was growing up, you could not find a salad in McDonald's, and today you can. So I don't know. You got to talk to the McDonald's CEO. Yes.
All right, interesting thought. Next question, Simon Gross, Canberra IQ.
Thanks for your talk. Excuse me. I want to ask about the Middle East war. You're a very big global farmer. I don't know where you manufacture. You probably manufacture around the world. So I'm interested to know what kind of challenges you're facing now in terms of manufacturing, energy supply and distribution globally and particularly Australia.
Yeah, good question. So when you're dealing with sales and manufacturing commercializations of chronic disease medication, you're less impacted by cyclical things because medicine is something that everyone needs. And in some ways, then during COVID, during financial crisis, during even geopolitical issues, you are less impacted than when you're selling commodities per se. Having said that, we are impacted by distribution, value chain. We are very worried about the health and the well-being of our employees, of our patients. As wars close down borders, pathways to transportation, then of course raw materials and goods gets disrupted. And then of course it becomes a big worry because we sell life-saving medications. What we try to hedge and avoid before situations arises is A, to have global manufacturing at different parts of the world. We have them in pretty much most continents and different corners of the world, so we can get to the end goal faster. What we do, of course, we have distribution hubs and inventories that we build up in good days so we can use during difficult periods for a period of time. But of course, as these wars prolongs itself, we get more and more worried. So right now we're monitoring the situation as careful as anyone else and hoping for the best.
Okay.
Next question, Katina Curtis from the West Australian.
Thank you very much for your speech today. I was interested in that stat that you said about the PBS that it takes. I think it was more than 460 days. Average,
466.
Yeah, average waiting time. We've also heard a lot about the problems with the PBS in Australia from American pharmaceutical companies in the context of Donald Trump's tariffs and the ongoing debate about that. Can you outline, I guess, what you think the biggest hold-up is in the way the PBS is structured? And you touched briefly on the enterprise foundation model that Denmark has for a lot of its companies, including yours. Do you think that that's a really big contrast to American capitalism? And is it the fact that the sort of, I guess, idea of rapacious big pharma companies from America trying to come at our PBS is really repulsive to a lot of Australians? Does that make reform more difficult?
So, again, multiple questions. Let me see. I think my understanding is, and I probably have to pass you to some of my Australian colleagues who are more experts in PBS than I am to give you a more detailed answer. But my understanding is that the whole health technology assessment and the PBS system here is a 30-year-old system. That itself tells me that revision is due. I think 466 days on average tells me that we need to do something better. And today, maybe 466 days gets lost because the whole drug development process is 10, 15 years, and okay, so who cares, let's add another year and a half to it. But imagine a situation on the back of the AI revolution that's happening, where pharmaceutical products gets developed much faster. Maybe with the help of AI, there will be less or no animal testing, so we can carve that out. And then the human testing, as well as, of course, the clinical development leading into regulatory filing, all gets shrunk to 1/3 of the period that it's today. And then yet, at the end of it, we have to wait 466 days to provide real access. Then it will be seen as a major bottleneck. Before that happens, I encourage those responsible and in charge to really look deeper into how we can keep the good part of that. I think it's really fantastic. There's a number of countries that don't do health technology assessments. That's to our advantage, being very sure of the values and the benefits of our medication, that someone does a proper technology assessment of it. We are not worried about that. Actually, it's my competitive advantage when someone does. But just do it a little bit faster so that the patients are able to get into it. With regards to the whole US situation, I don't have any real comments on that one. Yeah.
So how many days should it take?
I think if I was the Australian authority, I would start benchmarking. So rather than pulling up a number, because it, by the way, differs between different drugs and different, is it a new molecular entity? Is it completely, something that we have seen the safety of it already? So I think averages doesn't do anyone favor. But you could really create a benchmark process to say, we would like to be one of the fastest within OECD. We would like to be the fastest while being the most accurate. And then you will get to that number yourself, rather than me dictating one.
Zach De Silva from AAP.
Hi, thank you for your speech. The Australian Medical Association has long called for a tax on sugary drinks to try and tackle these issues of obesity that you're talking about. What do you make of that idea? Should Australia look at taxing sugary drinks? And if I can sneak a second one in, you've touched on AI a couple of times. How transformative has AI been, and how transformative do you think it will be over, say, the next 10 years for drug manufacturing?
Yeah. Sugar tax. It's a good question. I think it will help to some extent, but probably not on its own. I think in Denmark, some time ago, they introduced a fat tax. And I'm not so sure, but I think they took it off afterwards. And I think these taxations, take the cigarettes again as an example. A lot of countries have been trying to tax cigarettes. And while maybe that is effective for part of the population, it's been no way as effective as the solution you came up with here. So I would say it's part of the solution, but probably not the only one. AI, I think it speaks for itself. It is the new industrial revolution. It's impacting every industry and every human, and we're at the very early stages of it. And it will impact the healthcare industry as well tremendously, maybe even more profoundly than some of the other industries, because we have been behind. AI with large language model is basically connected to the data you feed it. And we have been, as humans, a bit more behind feeding our health data to the computer. That was a well-kept secret. We were able to take pictures of what we're eating and where we were walking and who we're talking to and posting that onto Instagram much faster than explaining to the world that I have this or that chronic condition. But that is also a bit changing. And as data becomes more and more available, of course, we can do much more with it on the back of AI. I am very hopeful that it will revolutionize drug discovery. Drug discovery, to a large extent, is trials and errors for many pharmaceuticals today. That with some scientific knowledge, but not fully understanding the anatomy of the body, you get a couple of scientists to do certain things, and when it works, then they go in that direction, and when it doesn't, they scrap it and try something different. I think AI could be an incredible tool for those scientists to get to the answers faster. As I mentioned, when it comes to regulatory approvals, there's a tremendous amount of speed that can be gained by AI putting the files together. And manufacturing. Robotics have been there, but probably also much, much more is to come in manufacturing, figuring out the quality, safety of these products in a much better way than human eyes often does. So it's going to be very big change, especially in the time frame of the 10 years that you mentioned.
Thank you.
You must have looked a lot at the numbers and impact and all that sort of thing. Will it mean fewer jobs for your company?
I think it will be different types of jobs. That's what the answer most people will tell you. I think the question mark for me personally has been, how will it impact job equity between white-collar workers and blue-collar workers? And that's quite an interesting one, because most of the debate you see on TV and the people you talk to, they're speaking about white-collar worker jobs and our ability to then pivot and shift from whatever we're doing today to something more meaningful, while we give the routine jobs to AI and artificial intelligence to do so. And while I'm a strong believer that that probably will happen, and the same way computers and other tools did not make a big impact but shifted the jobs for white-collar workers, will be another version of it. But what about blue-collar workers? What about if the existence and the introduction of physical AI, the next generations of the AI after agentic AI, will lead into factories not having humans in them anymore? And if you have been a blue-collar worker working on a machinery for the last 30 years, how fast can you redevelop yourself into something else? And I think as humans, we are resilient and will find ways to survive, but it's something that needs to be debated and discussed already now.
Okay. Question from Jennifer Beshwadi from the 7 Network, who hasn't been able to make it today. She says, given the rising rates of childhood obesity in Australia, do you believe GLP-1 drugs should be available for children and adolescents through the public health system rather than focusing on lifestyle changes? Yeah, so one of the projects that we are actually signing here today with the Murdoch research for childhood obesity relates to adolescent obesity. And that's specific, of course, to the Pacific Islands. But in general, I think it's a ticking bomb that our children and adolescents are right now becoming more and more obese across the world. And we need to find solutions. And the first and foremost solutions are some of the things I spoke to in my speech. Healthier environments, healthier school, taking care of exercise and food intake. But we are also, of course, making sure that our products are being tested and tried on adolescents and making sure that they're safe. So if support and help is needed on that front, also it's available so we don't discriminate the age. Okay. Next question, Megan Brodie from Med News.
Thank you so much for taking our questions. I'm really interested in the fact that at the end of the day, you're a medicines company and you've brought to market pretty much the holy grail of medicines. The GLP-1 class has enormous potential, from everything from heart disease, chronic kidney disease to Alzheimer's. But it's also brought about a paradox that there is such a large population that could benefit from it that it threatens the financial sustainability of our health systems, which would be, using your data, why the PBAC has recommended it for 155,000 people and not the 13 million people who could actually benefit. Which brings us to the solution, and you've put some really good solutions on the table today. But at the end of the day, you've got the medicine, and the medicine does work and it does help people. Do we wait for it to get even cheaper? Because it's already on the private market, but that doesn't make it affordable for everyone. Or do we expect health systems to take a broader view of value? And you've mentioned productivity. So if they think about the fact that people could get back to work, have less chronic conditions, suffer less. My reading of the public summary document on the decision from PBAC was for every 1,000 people who take this medicine, they can avert 188 deaths, which is enormous. So if we're looking at those sorts of data, where is the failing here? Is it the private market where we should be cheaper, or is it that the health systems should have a better view of what value these sorts of products can provide? It's not either or. I think it's all of the above, and let me try to elaborate a little bit on it.
the health systems have to take a more holistic picture of why healthcare budgets is becoming more and more stretched. Medicine is only around 15% of the cost of the healthcare budget. There's a lot of inefficiencies in every country's healthcare system. Hospitals, hospitalizations, the way that the whole social system works can be scrutinized a little bit more so that the pressure is not always on the lowest common denominator, which happens to be medicine prices. It's not, even if you make the medicine prices to zero, healthcare systems will go bankrupt the same way that they are progressing with the inefficiencies. So I encourage every health minister to look broadly into exactly where the money is going and try to find efficiencies in the whole system, including, of course, making sure that the value they put on the medication and what they pay is the right one. And that's the part that we welcome, especially, I would say, with our GLP-1 products. We welcome it because we feel that there's a huge value on treating with GLP-1 and treating obesity. We speak to it, and most common sense also understands it, that if you reduce your weight, many other complications are going to go away. Forget about the GLP-1. Thinner people have less issues with health than otherwise. That most people understand. So if you're able to help manage weight, then you actually save money elsewhere. So that's the other thing we say. And then on top of it, we basically zoom into the GLP-1 class and talk about cardiovascular benefits, that if this protects or slows down a certain heart attack, how much would that have cost in due course? A chronic kidney disease or MASH, fatty liver. If you allow that to continue, then it gets to cirrhosis and you have to basically get a liver transplant. A liver transplant in this country is $250,000 or more, maybe. So we have to do a better job, of course, explaining that. They need to do their health technology assessments of making sure that this explanation is just, hopefully in less than 466 days. And then we need to basically find the real and the true value of this. But it starts with actually the wish to have this partnership from both sides, from the pharmaceutical side also, and understanding that a bankrupt healthcare system is not a good payer, is not a good partner. That will not solve our problem. That actually increases our problem. So we need to actually make sure this happens. And then, of course, as these products become more and more in abundance, more competition comes in, loss of exclusivity kicks in, and medication comes cheaper and cheaper in certain, with certain levels of it, and then hopefully new innovations will be, replacing them with higher prices, and that equilibrium and balance is how we have dealt with pharmaceutical industry for decades.
And Tom, I'm going to be cheeky and get a second one in quickly.
Just very quick.
Very quickly. You mentioned PBAC, that you're actually in negotiations with the government. Where is that? It doesn't seem to be. You're talking about talking with the minister. Minister says he's talking with you. Where are we at with that?
So we have the good news is we have received a positive opinion now on that subpopulation. And now, of course, we need to discuss and negotiate further. So that's all I can tell you. Those negotiations are happening as we're speaking. But we're quite happy that at least there has been a positive opinion and an understanding on what populations are we going to start with.
Nick Stewart.
Focusing on that middle level, the prevention, and following up Zach's earlier question about preventative warnings. You made the point that taking sodium or salt off the table has improved health outcomes in Denmark. Can't we do the same, obviously, with sugar, which is you've got people working in Logan, which is a traditional Labor electorate. Now, up in the north, we have the sugar electorates, who obviously have a great deal of heft up there. Shouldn't we actually be looking at, instead of some sort of warnings, because of course sugar may not appear to be a large percentage of a cereal used in the mornings with milk, but shouldn't we actually have some form of levy that compensates the people of Logan for, that charges the people of the upper electorates that are growing sugar and gains money so that care can actually be provided for the people of Logan who may be eating the sugar?
Yeah, so I don't have broad enough knowledge to give you a yes or a no answer to the Logan situation. The salt situation was in Mexico City as part of changing cities for better health initiative that Novo does in collaboration with the governor and the mayor of Mexico City. And the emphasis is on the word collaboration and partnership, because you come in with your ideas, they have their own situation and wishes, but also some of the challenges that they may have. But then commonly you realize that this is a good solution for that specific population. So my encouragement, of course, is any good idea, just like the one that you mentioned, should be on the table to discuss with people in charge, in this case, let's say Logan, or any other city, to see the pros and the cons. What does it create? What does it take away? Who is the beneficiary and who is not? No matter what, healthier food, just general healthier food, is something that I will encourage. I'll encourage it as our parents to our children, and I encourage it as policymakers for the society at large.
Well, we've got this guest speaker membership for you. I was going to say maybe we'd get some fricadella put on by the chef, but all this talk of healthy food, maybe not. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Mike.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.